Marc Faber joins us today from New York. Is Marc Faber Limited out of Hong Kong with residence in Thailand as well. Marc, good morning.
Yes, good morning.
Let's talk about Thailand. Now, you are in Chiang Mai. How far is that from Bangkok?
It's about 700 kilometers.
So it's
and 1 hour flight.
400 miles away. What's a Thailand that we don't get? When we see the news reports and there's reds and yellows and the king is getting older, we've got these stereotypes. Yul Brynner really doesn't live there. We've got these stereotypes. What's the thing we most get wrong when we look at this turmoil in Thailand?
Basically, the country is very peaceful. The population is not aggressive. They're very tolerant. It's a very permissive society. And I think for most Thais, including myself, to see burning buildings in Bangkok was really a shock. That nobody could have anticipated. And if a year ago someone had told me the buildings will be burning in Bangkok, I would never have believed it. So I think there are some reasons why it happened. It's a complex story. Basically, a populist leader that had the support of the rural poor, Mr. Thaksin, came to power and was then ousted by a military coup in 2006. And then a new government was installed, which was more the Bangkok aristocracy. And Thaksin then was condemned for corruption and had also to pay a fine and is in exile. And he was again, we managed again to rally the poor behind him to start the demonstrations, whereby it has to be said, it's not proven that he paid the demonstrators, but it's very likely that he paid the demonstrators who have been paid about twice what they would earn in their salaries if they worked in factories and so forth. And then the trouble got out of hand, whether that was again directed by Mr. Thaksin or he lost control of the movement. That then happened, the violence erupted.
Well, will there be some kind of resolution anytime soon?
Well, basically, calm has returned because you have to see one thing. I think most people in Thailand do realize that Thaksin's aim and the red shirt's aim is actually not to boost the standards of living of the poor, but just to use them as kind of a human shield and as an excuse and to buy their votes. It's not about their group of leaders taking money and then redistributing money to the poor. It's about their group of leaders getting hold of the money pot that now is in the hands of the Bangkok elite and then carrying out the regime amidst the same or even worse corruption.
Marc Faber with us, folks. We talk Thailand. Of course, Marc Faber Limited out of Hong Kong and Chiang Mai, Thailand, coming to us today from New York. Mr. Faber, when you look at Thailand, we have this idea of terrific American support over many, many decades. What will be the new relationship of the United States with Thailand after this unrest? Do we just continue forward, or is there a new in Southeast Asia?
Well, I think in general, Western countries are supportive of the present government. And the sad part is that the present government under Abhisit is actually one of the best governments, has been very, very tolerant, and has actually expanded on the social programs Mr. Thaksin had begun. So they can't be accused of having, say, been against the rural poor. I think the bad part of Thailand is that it is quite typical of an emerging economy where business and the GDP is concentrated in a relatively small region, say in Indonesia, around Jakarta and around Surabaya, and in the Philippines around Manila and around Cebu. And the rural parts have not developed very much. But if you look at the United States, it's not totally dissimilar. There are some rural areas that haven't developed to the same extent New York has developed.
Mark, Robert Kaplan, writing in the Foreign Affairs magazine, Center Stage for the 21st Century, and just, the geography of a changing Asia. How does Thailand fit into a relationship with the emergent Chinese economy? Is there more back and forth where you live there in Chiang Mai with China than there's ever been before?
Well, very clearly, the entire region has become much more China-centric because for many countries, China has become the largest customer in terms of buying goods from these countries, and also the trade has expanded very dramatically with these countries. So the whole Asian region is becoming China-centric, and that is a concern I would have longer term about the Asian region. I'm very optimistic about investing in Asia longer term, but I can also see that the Americans, having essentially controlled Asia from their military and naval bases and their aircraft carriers in the Pacific, that they are being kind of pushed out by China, because obviously China doesn't want to be encircled, and that will lead to tensions.
Oh, and I misspoke, Ken. It's the geography of Chinese power, a terrific article by Robert Kaplan in Foreign Affairs magazine this month.
Correct.
Mark, a lot of the gloom, the doom, people have sort of caught up with Marc Faber. Is the liquidity/solvency issues of the last 3 weeks enough to give us a sharply marked down international GDP?
Well, I think, first of all, the market became very overbought in mid-April, and the correction was long overdue. The technical position of markets had deteriorated. So I think the sovereign crisis in Greece was kind of a catalyst to knock markets down. And it was a reminder that a number of Western states, nations, including the U.S. eventually, will have liabilities that are excessive compared to their economies. And so either taxes will have to go up or expenditures will have to go down, or a combination thereof, which then will not be particularly favorable for economic growth.
Mark, over the big picture here, when you look at what's happening in Greece and the rest of Europe, and you look at what's happening in Thailand, and what may happen in any other developing market, isn't it all just an argument to keep your money here in the U.S.?
Well, I think that near term, obviously, what has happened is, like in 2008, asset markets went down and the U.S. dollar went up. And essentially, since November 25th of last year, the dollar has been strong vis-a-vis the euro. In other words, the euro has begun to weaken. And as the dollar then strengthened, asset markets came down again, because a strong dollar is an indication that global liquidity is tightening. And so we have a similar pattern like in 2008. But I wouldn't call the U.S. dollar and U.S. government bonds to be safe. I just think they are right now, for the next 3 months, maybe the better option than, say, sovereign bonds in Europe.
Mark, just in the final 45 seconds we've got with you, what are you doing with your capital right now?
Well, actually, I'm doing very little, because I think we are in a correction period in markets where the S&P could still decline by another 10% to maybe 15%. But I don't think we'll see new lows, because the strong U.S. dollar and the market decline give again an excuse to the Federal Reserve to print money. So I think they'll come in again and massively monetize if the markets should go somewhat lower. And B, near-term markets are very, very oversold, and we have major support, which was the February 5th low at 1,045 on the S&P. So I think that near term, June, July, we could rally a bit, no new highs, and then we'll have more weakness into October, November.
Marc Faber, thank you so much. Particularly thank you, Mark, for comments on Thailand. Marc Faber today in New York.